Hi everybody and welcome to a new series of teachings that we're going to release on our website, and it will take the form of sessions in anything between 20 minutes and 30 to 40 minutes depending.
We wanted to try a bit more of a self-study style of teachings. So we've made the teachings shorter than we normally do. We're going to look at about 20 to 30 minutes each session. We'll focus on the anchor scriptures while we do the teachings, and then we'll release extra teaching or extra scriptures rather on the website along with the teaching. And then that should, if a person watches the teaching and then takes the extra scriptures and works through that, then you're looking at about a 2-hour potential session of self-study at home, which is ideal for these times.
So this is what it should look like. For the person at home, they can watch a short clip, 20 to 30 minutes. We do a quick explanation about principles, and we're going to work through different principles. And we'll explain just now what a principle is. Then there will be a list of scriptures that the person can use to expand their own understanding on the subject and the content of this particular principle teaching. Now, then they can follow a process of meditating and reflecting onto their own lives, and then meditating upon the greater meaning and the greater application of the principle.
Of course.
But this is best done if you take some time and look into the mirror of your own life and go, this principle, do I see it operating in my life at times? Do I see the potential for this principle to bring me good results?
Yes.
Can I identify areas in which this principle is currently lacking?
Yes.
So in total, you're taking a half an hour teaching plus a scripture study, and you might find other scriptures or remember other scriptures that pertain to this, and you can include it, make a list for yourself.
Yes.
And then some reflective time, and then you take some time to go and formulate in a personal way. For me as a person, to implement this principle, I need to pay attention to certain areas of my life that I can identify, but formulate it. Then you go in relationship, in communication, in action, in thought pattern. But then work out an action plan on how to measure how you're doing.
Yes.
To also identify areas where you're not implementing the principle, or in areas where there's some lack or failure when it comes to godly principles. And then you can formulate the consequences. In other words, what negative consequences is there for me that I can identify that I don't want? And so you can see how this becomes a 2-hour study. Yes.
Just on that note, and I think before we just have a look at what are principles, something to first and foremost realize in principles is that they are incredibly practical. For most people and in most of our faith walk, we understand that there is a great spiritual side to our existence and reality, and that's true. But the reason we're looking at principles, and part of the reason we're doing a study of the principles, is because of the practicality of it. Oftentimes, believers would see promises and truths in the Bible that they want to be true for them and want it to be true in their lives, but it remains lacking even if they full-heartedly believe what they read and what they see and what they know about God and about His ways. And so principles are a practical way, very, very practical way of implementing God's ways into our lives so that we can see the results that we so dearly want and that He has promised us and provided for us. And so that's why we're just emphasizing the self-reflection on our lives. It's one thing to see it and agree with it, but we want to get to a place where we can practically see where it's lacking, where we have implemented, where we see progress, where we see fruit, where we don't see fruit, so we can adjust our lives accordingly.
We're going to have a look at what a principle is and where they come from. But a personal note. And this is probably a good start for anybody that's watching these clips. Personally, for me, I love fellowship and I love God's people. But the reality is that we have taught on the principles over a period of time, and there has been quite a time lapse since we started first teaching principles. We have reiterated them over and over. I personally find that if I'm in a relationship of any kind with another person out there in different ways, and I find this person continuously over a period of time does not implement healthy principles,
godly principles,
that I minimize my communication with them.
It's true.
Not that I'm avoiding people, but certain people I'll minimize the communication that I have with them simply because they do not implement proper principles.
And I mean, it's not because of a judgment attitude that one has, because I have the same feeling towards such actions or non-actions, and I must say it's not a decision or an attitude of judgment towards another person, but I think more than anything else, it communicates the faithfulness and loyalty that they have to the faith and to God's purposes. Because I mean, in this journey, in this walk, and the reason God saves us and calls us is to conform us to the image of His Son. And I think if we walk in fellowship with someone over a long period of time, where principles are not implemented and changes are not made, then it communicates something about the lackadaisicalness with which they, take on this journey. And, we do not want to be yoked with a person that's going to keep us back in some way.
And this is not to make anybody feel bad.
No,
but I think
no.
we'd like to put this on record for the years to come. Because as we build relationship with more and more people, this is going to become a reality, not just for us. So I'm relaying something personal.
Yes.
That I am sure is a conscious or subconscious dynamic within all covenantal fellowship relationships.
Yes.
And that is the fact that the person that does not care enough to get to understand biblical principles and then do not care enough to implement them.
Yes.
They are communicating to the rest of the body that they don't care about the body enough.
Exactly, because the main reason we implement these principles while on earth is not to impress God.
No.
It's for the sake of the body, to be safe toward each other, to make the other person feel safe and secure in your presence. That's mainly what it's about.
So we see that the Israelites had to keep the feasts. Some of these events, these feasts, they had to go to Jerusalem where the temple were, and they had to present themselves to the Lord there. Now, a man that was found not, for a good reason, not to come and present himself in the sight of God, he just didn't do anything wrong, he just wasn't there.
Yes.
This person would be put out, excluded from the rest of the nation. They would actually consider this person to have transgressed the whole law of God. Why? See, when the whole nation comes and honors God, it brings God's blessing on the entire land and the nation. So they keep the feast, they are secure that the rain would fall in due time, due season. If the rain would fall and the ground was blessed, then they would have a good harvest.
Exactly.
They would have, their whole society, their economy would do well, everybody would prosper, everybody would have food to eat, their families would do well. So the way that a father would care for his family's prosperity would extend to taking action against the person that brought harm to them just by not bringing the blessing.
Exactly.
And so the person that didn't come to the feast,
Yeah, it's not like he murdered someone while
his
at home.
actions could cause the harm to the entire nation, because God could withhold the rain because of the actions of one disrespectful person. This is principle living.
Exactly.
This is what it is. It's principle living. There's certain principles, and if we keep the principles, everybody would prosper and be blessed.
Yes.
One person decides not to keep the principles. He's not doing anything
Actively wrong.
evil.
Yeah.
He's just not keeping the principle.
Exactly.
He could bring harm to the entire group of people, nation, church, fellowship. And this is why we want to reiterate and emphasize that these principles are not suggestions, not try this as a self-help
See if it works for
thing.
you.
As we look into God's law to glean the principles, we very clearly communicate that the principle is not a law.
Yes.
And yet, the principle has a dynamic of being a law because of the consequences that it has. See, a law works like this. The law of gravity. Whether you like the law or you don't like the law,
Whether you believe in the law or
You-
don't believe in the law.
you can be one of those people that says, I don't believe in the law of gravity because it's a man-made concept. You go jump off the roof, you're going to splatter on the ground. That's the way gravity works. Whether you know the law,
Yes.
so ignorance
Adhere to the law.
ignorance of the law of gravity is not going to change the law of gravity.
Exactly.
Disbelief or rejection of the law is not going to change a single thing.
Exactly.
The consequences and the results, that will be evident.
They're definite.
Same with principles. A principle, in essence, we do not define as a law.
No.
So it's not enforced by the church,
No. Nor by God.
nor by God. But the consequences is unavoidable.
Exactly. And so maybe at this stage we can just go back to why do we glean the principles from the laws and yet say they're not laws? How does that whole dynamic work? Well, I think to start off with, it's important to note that the laws of God, or the commandments of God, in its original form was nothing more than the sayings of God, or the expressions of God. So even though he does enforce a certain culture upon the people and call them to order and, expect certain and expect certain behaviors from the nation of Israel, it was actually, in its essence, in its purest form, it was a revelation of God's ways, even of his character, what brings him delight. And so when we glean the principles from the laws, we do not look at the laws as something to be enforced, but we try to understand the heart behind what God expressed. Why did he express certain things to them in a certain way? Why is it that he gave them certain restrictions, certain boundaries? What is it that he was trying to convey of his own heart, of his own character? And once we can find that, then we can form a principle and see, well, if this is part of who God is and part of his ways that will lead us into blessing and prosperity and also, conform us to his image and his likeness, then that is what we're going to implement. So it's not something we want to enforce, it's something that we're going to delve out of the revelation of God's character and his ways.
This provides a framework for community living and fellowship, a framework in which we can all have understanding. There's a very clear and solid agreement
Yes.
forged. And so what if we said, well, we all just agree on the whole Bible? Which is true.
Yeah.
It's true. We do. You see, what happens in the Christian world is they're always talking. Always talking. But because they never define the principles that we're going to implement in the way we do things,
Yes.
why we do it, how we're going to get there, they always have to talk
Make
and
plans.
discuss things.
Yeah.
The fact is that principles can be identified, it can be formulated, communicated, and then it becomes an accountability, and no more need to talk about it. It's when principles are not adhered to. The lawbreakers cause the talking.
Would you mind, in the few minutes that we have left for the introduction, to just explain to us how principles work as a navigational system? Because this is probably the best way to understand.
Okay, so everybody in our fellowship knows this teaching. If you're on the open ocean and navigators would use the stars, read the stars in order to navigate their way to the land or the area that they wanted to reach over a very wide, vast ocean. The principles are like that. They're embedded in the script, in the word. We take them out and it's like the stars in the sky. Now the stars in the sky is part of the universe and the cosmos and all of that. But all you need to have is a few identified star patterns, and you just use it over and over and over and over. You don't have to reinvent it, you only have to stick to the roots. Now you can change the roots.
Yes,
and the way you
accordingly,
use it,
yes.
but the stars remain exactly in the same position,
Exactly.
they remain the same. Now, principles work like this. Okay, principles are taken from the intent of God's word. We can identify scriptures that clearly expresses certain eternal pillars around which we can operate.
Yes.
Okay. So, for instance, the principle of beginning and end, God created in the beginning, and there is a very clear end to creation. The day and the night is a clear beginning and end to the night and the day, and so forth and so forth. And so he even expresses his own identity as he's the beginning and the end.
Yes.
So it would be good for us, as we are commanded to become godly, and the God of our faith is to become Messiah-likeness, to implement this as a beginning and the end. Now, all the other principles, it's very important to understand that principles all link to each other.
Yes. Yes. Like a gear system.
Exactly. So they all connect to each other, and they're simple to understand. In the beginning you have to study the texture, the context of the principle.
The details.
But once you've done that, you'll have a basic understanding, and then the principle just has to be implemented.
Yes.
It'll become second nature. How would you ever cultivate a godly character and nature? Okay, this is what happens in the Christian world. They tell you you have to cultivate a godly character. Great value system. But without the principle, nobody's going to get there. Because you're going to cultivate according to your own understanding, your own intentions, good intentions. God's word and the substance of his person is going to be a far better map to use to get to that character.
Yes.
Now, the process is like this. Get to know, we've named the principles. Get to know the principles, because if you don't have a list of principles in your memory, then firstly you're going to forget some of them,
Yes.
which means you won't implement them.
And how can you implement something that has not been defined, that you don't know what it is that you have to implement?
Right. Then start to practice implementing the different principles. You'll find that you can implement in one situation several principles because they all work together.
Yes.
And it is actually effortless.
Yes.
You just need to pay attention.
Exactly.
And you need to stop doing certain things
Yes.
and begin to do the opposite.
Yes.
That's how principles work. The way the study is going to be, short teaching, scriptures, do it yourself.
A DIY study. So, enjoy the study of the principles.
These will be released, but you can watch them anytime, watch them over and over, and make notes for yourself on it. So you have the videos to refer back to. You have the scriptures and you have your own notes.
And then also, I mean, these are obviously we're going to keep them quite comprehensive and compact, but we do have longer teachings available. So if you do feel you want more depth, more understanding, or more material that you want to go look at, please feel free to go look at some of the other studies that we have done on the principles, which entail longer teachings.
And then a very important note, now that we are releasing these principle teachings, we did teach in length on them. We have repeated principles over a very long period of time in teachings, and now we are doing the very precise, defined teachings on this. Now, this is what a very important note is that if a person has been diligent in keeping up with what is being taught, diligent in meditating upon it, and then diligent in implementing it.
Yes.
So implement it by name. Don't have a vague idea of I'm going to implement this thing. That's never going to work. Implement it by name. I'm implementing the principle of beginning and end. When you remind yourself to do it, you call it beginning and end. Okay? This is how it works. Then you know what you have done, and you know what you have not done. Now, this should long term mean that people don't have to ask us so many questions, and they don't have to approach us so often. So we still want people to run things past us.
Yes, and we still want fellowship and relationship, of course.
If people have to make decisions or are faced with the situation, the communication should start to look like this. Look, I'm dealing with this situation. What I'm implementing is, I'm implementing beginning and end. I'm implementing planning ahead. I'm implementing formulation. I have formulated. And so I want to check with you. This is the result that I'm getting at.
Then what do you think about my process? Did I miss anything? Is there anything else I should have considered? And then the result is obviously going to be much more concise, much more defined, and much faster. So the progression is going to be much faster.
And fellowship relationship should start looking more like a biblical blueprint of we witness to what you're doing.
Exactly.
Instead of I'm unsure, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, so I want to talk to you about it. And that's processing. So we are very clearly moving away from processing to a process where we witness to your process, we witness to your wisdom, we witness to that. And the person becomes mature, becomes confident and steadfast, but trustworthy. So others can trust their actions, their communication, and so forth. The more we implement principles, the more we start trusting each other. And this is a very important note, I almost forgot about this. Never develop a mindset where, well, there's a principle, we can't bend this principle because we're rigid and we're not legalistic.
No.
We want the benefits and the security from principles. Now, we're not saying break the principles.
No.
But when we have to discern between gracious action, wise counsel, and not offending, then we would work within the scope of principles, but in a wise way. Principles lead to wisdom. Okay?
And principles keeps everyone safe.
And so we never want to get to a mindset where we are now checking each other.
No, or correcting each other, or making sure, because again, it's not law, but it is the principles of God. It's not that it was our idea, and it is there to keep ourselves safe, to keep each other safe, and to help everyone, like we said, to be a blessing, to give a blessing, so that the whole body can mature together and be edified together.
Yeah. So, principles, please, should not ever lead to a bondage situation.
No.
It should always lead to a freedom situation.
Yes.
And yet, it's a freedom to fellowship and move forward together.
Yes.
Enjoy this series, and that's just, I think that's all the explanation we need to do.
Enjoy the series, guys.
Cool.